So we're now going to go ahead and talk about minification and why you should go ahead and minify code, particularly in a production environment, and also known as compressing. Now, you can really use any website to do this. It doesn't really matter, or any tool to do this. You might have a tool built in to your text editor. You might have a tool as part of your workflow, like a grunt package or something like that. However you compress or minify code, it's such a good idea to do so. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking an example snippet of code and we're going to be minifying it and see the difference, and then take a little moment to explain why it's a good idea to go ahead and minify your code. So I'm on this website here. Again, like I said, it doesn't really matter where you minify it, as long as it's using some kind of reliable compressor like YUI compressor. If we take a look at YUI compressor, this is the Yahoo compress that allows you to compress JavaScript code, basically. So here's some sort of usage from the command line, but we're going to do this really easily and use a tool that already bakes all this functionality in for us. So you can see here that we've got the ability to enter text, files, or a URL, which is really useful. And we've also got the ability to choose a file type as well. So this can minify JS or CSS. So in this case, we're going to be minifying JavaScript. So I'm going to go ahead and paste a block of code into here. I'll make that a little bit bigger so you can see. It's just the code that we used to lint earlier. So we have perfectly valid code that works. And I've also got this open in my text editor. And I've also got this open in my, if we just get rid of this line here, I've also got this open in my browser as well. So we can actually go ahead and check that this code does actually work. So we're using the increment method at the moment. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to paste this in here as we've just done. I'm going to choose that I want this to be JavaScript, obviously. And we've got a few options down here as well, which you can play around with depending on how you want to, what kind of sort of level of compression that you want to get. I'm going to go ahead and compress it, and we'll see the results, and we'll talk a little bit about the results. So here we've got the compressed code. Now there is a compression ratio of 41%, which is pretty good. Basically what this has done is it's gone and got rid of all of the tabs, it has got rid of all of the spaces, and we now have this sort of compressed code here. And you'll notice that we've also have sort of variable names returned like BA. So what we've got here is quite cleverly, this is decided that the function parameter names that I gave aren't really important. These aren't important to how the function works, because for a developer they're important, because certainly if we were to look at this code here, this is a lot easier to understand what's going on, because we have first, second. I've named the parameters of these functions based on what I think would make sense to another developer. However, in this case, this isn't meant to be human readable code. There's no need for this to be human readable. So what has happened is the minification here is that it's replaced it with BA and then returned BA rather than first, second, return first, second. So this is the code we end up with. It will work in exactly the same way. And this again should be sort of part of a workflow, because it is extremely annoying to keep two copies of files, have one minified. I mean, it's perfectly normal to do so, but generally you'd want to build this into sort of part of your workflow. But this will work perfectly. There's no difference in the way the code actually functions. It still does the same thing. You'll find that when you use a library like jQuery, for example, this library will already come minified. It will have a minified version, and the compression ratio there is again good, because you don't want to be downloading more code than you need. The point here is that the user of an application will never see this code, and will probably never really want to see this code unless they're another developer curious as to what your code looks like. But generally, it's better for network, your network servers, the user actually downloading the file, to minify a piece of code. If you reduce the file size by even 40%, that's 40% less that a user then has to download. So that's how we minify code. and a little bit about why we should minify code. And you can use many tools to do so. The tools that you use don't really matter as long as it uses a good method of actually compressing. And you can go ahead and play around with the options here as well. There's no symbol obfuscation, which is obviously going to not minify as much. Different preserve options, and there are other ways to do this as well, but it's quite useful to see the stats as well as to how your code has been compressed also. So yes, that's how we minify, why we should minify, and it's a good idea to build this into your workflow so that you can release lower file size pieces of JavaScript.